Hello.
Hey. Hi there.
Hey, y'all.
Hi there. Sorry we're late.
No worries. I think you're right on time.
Actually, yeah.
Hi, Patrice.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, this adjustment going smoothly as can be.
Smoothly may not be the exact adjective I would use, but it's definitely going well.
It's going. Yeah. I'm sure there are some bumps in there, but yeah.
Yeah,
You
but
got
it's
it.
been great. It's been great. It has not scared me away, so that's good.
Good. Good. That's the main thing, I suppose. I figure we'll give it probably, well, at least until we have quorum, but I kind of had in mind about 3:05, so we'll see where we are. I know we were just getting started, or waiting for a few folks to join so we have quorum. Welcome.
Hey, how y'all doing, everybody? Hope everybody having a great week so far.
Likewise, doing well.
Yeah, let's save our water though.
Hey, Jeff, is Apollo still part of this subcommittee?
I
You know?
believe that he is.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Maybe the last two sessions, perhaps he hasn't been with us, but as far as I know that he is. And probably would be appropriate for me to try to reach out and check in and see. I imagine we have his contact from just the application process, etc., most recent, but maybe I could just touch base. Hi, Jane, welcome. Just getting our quorum together here. And I'm reading lips as best as can, but it looks, I think I was following.
Are you on?
No Dina today.
Are you muted?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's with her mama.
so nice seeing her. That was great.
Thank you. My daughter was on our Racial Justice Coalition call last night, so she was with me for the meeting. Hi, Marcus, welcome.
We have quorum now.
Excellent.
Thank you. Glad I can be here. I'll be off camera most, if not all, of today's meeting.
No worries. Glad you're here. Hi, Miss Cheryl.
Hello, sir.
Glad you're with us.
Gracias, glad I can be here.
And I think maybe we'll just give it one
Working
more
with
minute.
Ronell. Ronell's having a trouble getting in, so I'll be working with him offline to get him in.
Okay, well, we can take another minute just as if he's is attempting to join. We have an indication he'll be with us. That'd be great if he's part of our discussion.
As the host hasn't let him in yet, but
Hmm.
don't believe that's a requirement. I think what happened is he tried to join before I joined and it wouldn't let him in.
Oh,
That's right. I told him try again.
okay. Well, there we
he is.
go.
We got him, yay.
Hi, Renell.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, and you?
Not too bad.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I think we're ready to get going. We're about 5 minutes past and we've got quorum. So, hi everyone. No real newcomers in the group. I know everybody here has been around for these meetings at least once. So I see that as, I suppose, spinning always the positive if I can. Yes, there are documents for the meeting, and what I can do is do my share screen like I was doing in past. And also just put a link in the chat, but let me do the share screen first. Okay, so people seeing our agenda for today's meeting. And let's see, just checking the chat. There we are. I can add this file. Should be able to pull it up on your computer through the same link. And I think just in the interest of our moving, I guess, as quickly as through as many things as we can, I'm gonna kind of just brush through what would have been our normal introduction to the background system, overview of the chart and our work plan and how we got here from the task force, because we have that background from the people that are in this meeting, unless folks feel otherwise and want to talk on anything before we get to our agenda. I suppose I'd say let's just run with our agenda and the moving to, I guess, let's take a second to say our introductions, name org that we're here appearing on behalf, and then if we have any announcements, this could be a moment to do that too, I suppose. So yeah, Jeff Landau with the Racial Justice Coalition. I'm a steering committee member. I'm also a public defender in the county. And no announcements for me to make. Let me pass it over to Kiki.
Good afternoon, Kiki Williams, Contra Costa County Probation Manager.
And then how about Ronell?
Ronell Ellis, Field Operations Coordinator for the Reentry Network, Health Right 360.
And Patrice?
Hi, everyone. Patrice Guillory, Director of Office of Reentry and Justice. This is actually my first CEF meeting, so I'm happy to be here and hear the discussion.
Welcome, Patrice. So glad you're with us. How about Nicole?
Nicole Popchak, also with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Great. Chris?
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris James with the W. Hayward Burns Institute.
Hi, Chris. And Cheryl?
Cheryl Seventh, Racial Justice Oversight Body, part of the Diversity Subcommittee and the Racial Justice Coalition.
Hi, Cheryl. How about Jane?
Hi there. I am with the Racial Justice Coalition and Surge Contra Costa, and I think this is the second or third time I've been able to make it to one of these subcommittee meetings.
Glad you're with us again. Marcus?
Marcus Walton, representing Superintendent of Schools, Lynn Mackey in the Contra Costa County Office of Education.
Thanks, Marcus. Let's see. Melvin?
Afternoon, Melvin Russell. I'm with the probation department.
Hi, Melvin.
Hey, Joe.
Let's see. How about Noe?
Hi, this is Noe Godino. I'm the racial justice body and the Economic Opportunity Council, Contra Costa, and community members.
Hi, Noe. Was enjoying that music in the background. And Ronell?
I already introduced myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. We did go through.
It's all good.
So I think everyone's had an opportunity at this point, right? Great. So just invite then, if anyone does have introductions that they want to make beyond just our intros, we'll have the opportunity. It's such a small group that we can be pretty informal with that, I think. But, and I'll stop share for a moment. Does anyone have any announcements that they'd want to make just before we get started with the agenda? Okay, well, we can keep rolling. So public comment, and that would be on any item that technically that's not on our agenda, but we're pretty broad with this too. If there's something that you want to talk on and don't have the chance to stay, really to comment on anything that you think anyone has something to contribute in this area on public comment. Either by raising hand is good, or just, you're welcome to unmute given how small we are. Not seeing anything in the moment. Chime in later if there's something. Okay, approval of the record of actions from last time. This can be helpful to pull up. Does everyone have, and anyway, why don't I just pull up so that you have it on the share screen and at least have that opportunity to see it. Okay. So this is record of actions from May 13th. Last time around. Folks are seeing that, yeah? Okay, perfect. Notably, I guess I just bring up that there was comment from Crawford Carpenter about an issue that we did add to agenda, and so that's memorialized. And this is all in the YouTube recording as well, which is great to give that additional background. Basically, I didn't see anything, and I'm inviting anyone if they had something that they noticed to modify, add. And has everyone had the opportunity to at least look through? Okay. So if anyone's in favor of approving the record of actions as drafted, I'll entertain motions. Anyone move to approve them?
I will.
Great, thanks, Kiki. And anyone second?
Second.
Thanks, Ronell. Okay, it's before the group. It seems like there's not any controversy here. Any discussion, public comment? Okay, sounds like we're ready to take a vote.
Jeff,
Yes.
Kiki,
Sorry, yes.
Marcus, I don't know if you're muted. I didn't hear it. Ronell,
Yes.
Noe?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Okay. And Marcus, we can come back to you, or if,
He put a comment in the,
Got it.
yeah, it's a yes.
okay, perfect. Then we did. I just wasn't seeing that
Sorry,
because I was
I
at my
didn't-
share screen.
I didn't have it up either, so I apologize.
No, we're good. Okay, so moving right along, we've got past our previous business, or we've confirmed what our previous business was. And now standing agenda for JJCC updates. I look to Kiki if there's anything, as well as others, but you're sort of our go-to person on this. So first to you.
Sure. So the Prevention, Intervention, and Community Engagement Subcommittee met on Monday, the 7th. There was mostly discussion about, and I think we might have talked about this, or you all might be familiar, that we were attempting to put together a huge contact list for prevention service providers. And so that list got a lot more robust than it had been back in May when we last looked at it. So that was good. We discussed looking through it a little bit more closely because the goal was to find new and unknown types of programs. There appeared to be a couple on there that we might already contract with. So we just need to look over it a little bit more closely to kind of clarify or confirm, if you will, the status of a couple of them. And then aside from that, we went over a questionnaire that has been put together in the form of like a Google document. So we did kind of a short version and then what we refer to as the long version. We had Stephanie Medley test it out as a RISE person to see how long it would take. It's a really comprehensive list of questions, about 7 sections, if I think 7 subject matters, if I'm not mistaken, that really goes into the population of the service providers, what their capacity is, potential wait list issues, any exclusionary types of population issues, regional locations, you know, how they're offering the services. So lots and lots of different kinds of questions, pretty much that a nice amount of sort of diverse folks have contributed to really kind of touch on all the different types of areas of concern that we might have when we're looking for prevention services, and also stuff that is very closely tailored to any size. So for instance, a really huge organization like a Seneca versus a place that maybe just has 1 site and just a couple staff. So we're really looking to make sure that any kind of service provider is covered in this questionnaire. And there's also questions built in about, say, a smaller organization or program maybe needing some help and maybe partnering with a larger, so basically asking a larger organization, would you be able to be kind of a mentor to a smaller sort of mom and pops type of service provider if they needed some help with building their capacity? So we went over that. It's now been sent out to us by RDA to review. So between now and the first week of June, we're all going to kind of do our independent review, make any suggestions and edits and send it back for the co-chairs to discuss and sort of come up with more of a final version, with the hope that by the first week of August, we'll be able to actually start sending it out to the program contact list that we've put together. And we're still welcoming contacts. So if you all think of anything and you don't know who to send it to, feel free to send it to me so that I can have it added to the overall contact list of potential providers. And that's what we talked about.
Thanks, Kiki. It sounds like there's a lot of work that's going in there and that it's to a really good purpose, that this is being a lot of thought going into it as it's happening, and different minds that should be part of the discussion sounds like are part of it, which is terrific. I just like for me to clarify, and then I'm going to invite others if they have questions. So this questionnaire is going to be sent out to folks or to organizations. They'll give their responses and then they'd be received back by JJCC and kind of analyzed once they'd come back, but it would be coming back to JJCC. Is that right?
Yes. So basically we're kind of telling people with this questionnaire, hey, we heard about your program. We're trying to give away some money, through JJC's PA funding for this prevention purpose. So if you're interested, complete this questionnaire and then we kind of go from there. So, we talked a lot initially before this past meeting about the timing. We don't want this to be a super cumbersome, burden on folks. But on the other hand, we'd really like to give some funding to some programs. So we think it's also important to be as detailed in our questions and to really get a good idea of, how agencies differ, where they're located, how much they're willing to meet our youth and families in the community, that kind of stuff. So, so we're trying to get as much information we can on the front end so that no one's time is wasted. Also, we talked about maybe sorting the questionnaire in a way that kind of answers some of our burning preliminary questions about things that we're looking for to address service gaps on the front end. So maybe we find that, after page 1, we don't know if this is going to be a good fit for what we're looking for or something like that, or give us a way to kind of sort through it so we can sort of categorize the different service providers as well.
Yeah, thinking in advance with that. And I love how you talked about the capacity of some of the orgs to be able to provide assistance mentorship to the others. So that is a cool aspect.
Yes.
Other comments from folks, and I'm looking into seeing how I can make Nicole co-host as welcoming anyone to unmute and give comment on what Kihi's brought to us.
That sounds like an amazing idea. And I'm curious, if those are, if that's a piece of information while we're sharing like guidelines and things like that, or we're supposed to be, right, that's coming up to discuss in another subcommittee because we talked about it, but we need to actually get on the agenda to do it. If that's something that perhaps as your process is rounding out, if that is information that we could share, because I think we would have a lot of the same questions. And if we don't have to duplicate work between the groups, it sounds like an amazing, honestly, I'm just a little jealous that I didn't think of doing something that way. It's a really great idea. So.
Well, thanks. Speaking to something that you said, we talked a few meetings ago, because my question kind of was, well, how do we get it out there? Like, we want everybody to know, that this exists, so that, there's, I'm sure, 1,000 programs that we have no idea, any connection with at all, that we don't even know exist, and they don't know that we're looking for them. So I think that is still a conversation piece. Right now, we're just trying to get the actual document, started or actually finalized and get it to the people that we do know about. And then there's been discussion of, posting it on the county website. Certainly word of mouth is huge. And that's kind of what we're using as a driving tool right now, because I'm hopeful that everybody who's listening right now will go and say, hey, I know about this place in my neighborhood, and actually say, we're looking for you, and just give us the contact information. And at this point, we're doing the legwork and actually reaching out to the programs, but we hope to put in some kind of a system of advertisement, if you will, so that goes both ways, so that folks can find us and reach out to us to be considered or submit their surveys as well.
And I think too, the hope is when the survey goes out to the different programs, that they too then would reach out to programs that they've been partnering with, or have conversations of just bringing it up as, hey, did you get this? And if not, hey, here's a contact, you should be interested, and hopefully it spreads that way as well. And I know RDA, we increased their capacity to be able to help with technical assistance and all that other stuff. And so it's really going to be an exciting time for us too. Because I think one of the things, and I know for myself of looking at services in our county, it's always the same sort of service providers that you have. And so the fact that we can actually widen the net and get a lot of these other places who can come in and do great work, because we want to be as diverse as we can for the services throughout the county, not just focused in one part of the county, but throughout the entire county. So it's going to be exciting.
That's actually to the very final question on the questionnaire is like, hey, thanks for filling this out. Now, who else should we contact? So we're actually asking folks on the questionnaire for, to give us another program or partner that we might be able to reach out to.
Really acting with intention in this. I guess that's veteran, thoughtful people getting together and knowing through experience that these things will be good. So we'll all think of if there's additional contacts that we want to make aware to send to Kiki. It's the next step basically for us, I suppose. And anything further from this agenda item before we move to our next, which would be talking about coordinating with data subcommittee?
Actually, Jeff, I have a question.
Yes.
So, and forgive me if I missed this, Kiki, but what's the timeline on the survey to be sent out?
So, and I think I actually misspoke originally because I'm like, it is June. I think I said June, but so by the first week of July, so the day after the holiday is our target date as far as making sure that all of our individual edits and revisions and suggestions go into it. Because as you can imagine, we're looking at a document, scrolling down together. So we didn't get to go into the weeds just quite as much. So first week of July, we'll have it our goal is to have it in its final form. And then first week of August is our goal to actually begin sending out the final questionnaire to the contacts that we currently have and the contacts that we might get in the meantime over the next 2 months.
Okay, great. I'd love to hear about the outcome of that, because that might be something that we want to apply even on the adult side too, or at least for organizations serving adult populations, and
sure,
be sure we cast a wide net. Just generally speaking, we need a wider net of providers in the county, irrespective of what populations they're serving.
Absolutely. And I think, Christopher, you actually mentioned something about sharing. I think, a part of me being invited over here was so that we could try not to duplicate some things. So I certainly, I absolutely feel like this is something that we should share and make even, and that's buildable. That's kind of a living document, as we like to say at probation, so that we can make it sort of an all-inclusive thing. And many of my personal suggestions about it came from a background of vetting placement programs. So I know there are very specific things that I want to know from probation about programs, like you mentioned, Patrice. I want to know, is this only for the child, or can I refer an adult probation client who's having issues with their children, or what I mean? So those are the kinds of things that that we definitely all contributed to make sure that it's very inclusive and that it's going from the child, kind of all the way through the family, because as we know, sometimes helping one member of the family is indirectly helping everybody else. And so I definitely think as it finalizes, it'll be a more sort of public shared thing that we can kind of pass back and forth and hopefully continue to contribute to.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's clear we all like it. We're all very into this project and how it's going. So unanimous. And maybe the last thing is exactly, that's the word. Brilliant. So any public comment, which we do for each of our items, is public comment on any of them. So welcome to, and maybe I can just take the moment to welcome, is it Ozzy Carter? And if you'd like to, you're welcome to just unmute for a moment and introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Ozzy Carter, CAB member.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're with us.
Thank you.
So we're just now turning to number 5 of our agenda items, which is coordinating listening session with the data subcommittee to share data publicly. And I'm hoping that perhaps either Chris and or Nicole might have a little intro, further background on this one.
Yeah, I am speaking up just to basically put Cheryl on the spot right now, honestly, because Cheryl brought this up in the data subcommittee meeting. Another brilliant idea, right? So obviously this group has had a listening session before, was really well attended, and I think we scheduled it in such a way, right, that it was the first hour of a 2-hour meeting. And what we saw, I think, was that if you're going to give folks that platform, they didn't want to stop because we had to get to our meeting business. But rather than just reflecting generally on what that process was like, Cheryl, as we were talking about data and ways to present it and where to present it and how it should look, was mentioning that we could have the opportunity, right, to revisit listening sessions, or at least one listening session, to invite community in, to show them data and to talk to them about what the takeaways of that are, what that means, what it says and what it tells us. And I mean, obviously that's a great idea that aligns with the purpose of this subcommittee and, you know, some of the work that this subcommittee originally, as we were building out the work plan, was interested in doing. I have said enough words. So Cheryl, if you want to speak to this idea that you gave voice to, go for it.
Oh, Christopher, always on the spot, always on the spot. I think he said it all. Really, if you guys have not seen the data that's we have been reviewing on that subcommittee, it is very eye-opening, a little bit depressing at the same time. But the Board of Supervisors always ask for numbers and data. And while it's great to have anecdotal information, it is always the crux of a conversation to have data. That is what, while emotions can drive things, this data is what drove us, many of us years ago, to form the Racial Justice Coalition and drove us into those chambers to push the Board of Supervisors to form the task force that led to this oversight body. So it is important to look at these numbers from that aspect and to use these numbers to drive down these discrepancies that we see in this criminal legal system. But it is also important for the public to look at these numbers. And so we can help us make informed decisions on how we move forward, and not just on either emotions or anecdotes or what we think we know. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, or we don't know the extent of what we really do know based on these numbers. And some of these numbers are pretty eye-opening, even to those involved in the criminal legal system. These numbers were shocking to them, of where Contra Costa County sits among the other 57 counties in the state, and where they sit nationally. So I think it is important that as the community engagement subcommittee, that we spend some time sharing this information with the public and helping the public understand what's behind these numbers. And then we all come back together to figure out what are our next steps that we propose to the Board of Supervisors on what do we do now? Because it's one thing to have numbers, and it's another thing to have a plan on what we do with the information that we've gathered. That was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, that definitely helps put it in context of what this is about. And I feel like this is, in practice, making sure that the work of the task force and the oversight body is not just in a pamphlet or stored somewhere, that it's in practice, that we're constantly making sure that there's action happening. And if there's this sort of data, and I know that there is, that is so impactful, we have a responsibility to get it out there and make sure that it's seen. So let me invite others to talk. I have maybe some thoughts I would add later, but anyone want to comment on this or say anything on the concept of our basically having a listening session and what steps that might look like in terms of our subcommittee hosting a space to share this information?
I just have a question.
Sure.
So has any of the data that was examined at the point where the Racial Justice Task Force was formed, what was that, 3 years ago? Have there been updates? Has the data subcommittee been able to collect and determine that there have been updates in the past 3 years? Because I know a big struggle in some of those early meetings was the lack of data collection. So I'm just wondering, maybe Cheryl can answer better. Like, has anything shifted, I guess, in both areas, that there's new data on some and has the data collection improved?
I see Patrice has also come off of mute, so she can probably help with this as well. But this is not just the data from the task force. This is also new data that we have been gathering as the subcommittee, and this is data from chiefly lots of really good data that I have to give. I mean, we gave them a hard time before, so I have to, as a matter of integrity, I have to make sure we give them their proper appreciation. The probation department has done yeoman's work in helping us gather additional data from the past few years. They've been awesome at getting us some really good data, more recent data, and we are hoping we can get that same cooperation from some of our other law enforcement and other people in the criminal legal system. But some of these is more recent data. As you may know, you don't, much of this is going to be at least 18 months or 2 years back because of the way the reporting cycles run in the criminal legal system. So you look at end of 19 approximately, right? But our relationship is far and approved in not just 180, but about 360-degree difference from what it was when it was the task force, from how we have been working with our law enforcement and criminal legal partners. They have been, especially our probation office has been very forthcoming and just very good partners in helping us get data and usable data, I will say. Not all data is good data. It's been very usable. And like I said, it's been eye-opening for us. And that's why I think it's good for the public to see and not just make presumptions based on their own experience. Even myself, I mean, sometimes we make presumptions and assumptions of what you think is going on, and it colors your judgment about what people are doing and their intentions, right? for better or for worse, and it colors how we should move forward. And good data helps us make informed decisions about how we should be making recommendations on how we should be moving forward. And I think that as a scientist, those of you who know that I'm a scientist and I'm a molecular biologist, I live and breathe data. And I think that that's very important. But this data, Ms. Jane, is not the data that we initially used from years ago. It's that plus this most recent data. Ms. Patrice, she may have something to add.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl, for that historical context and just your framing. Brilliant. What we received recently was just a monthly snapshot of both probation data, County Office of Ed's expulsion and suspension data, and then also the Sheriff's Office booking data. To Cheryl's point, that it's very imperative to have not just raw data, but data that's easy for us to analyze and to put forth to the public where it can be easily digestible. So even when we're talking about potentially hosting listening sessions, it will be a big lift on, not that it's not doable, but just, just highlighting the obvious here, that for some of our criminal justice partners who are not used to collecting data in a particular manner that would be useful for the community, it will be our role with ORJ and hopefully in partnership with Barnes that we work with our criminal justice partners to be able to produce data in a manner where we can have dashboards made available, and then also for a community-wide event, have data that's displayed in a manner where folks can really understand the linkages between all of the different justice system partners, to include Office of Ed, even though it's not necessarily a justice system partner, but highlighting that sort of school to prison pipeline. So during our last meeting, we did talk about what's the sort of frequency we want to see data be produced. We got down to, I believe, quarterly, so the three agencies I mentioned were able to receive quarterly data from them. Denise has access to DOJ data, so she's able to pull from there as well. But soon we'll be putting a request to the mayor's conference, and maybe even potentially the what are they called? City Managers Association, requesting their support to ask their chiefs of police to produce similar data as well, particularly around stop data. So we are, to Cheryl's point, now, mind you, I didn't have all the history from the task force to now, but from what my understanding, we have moved light years ahead, surprisingly, but in a very good way. And I think the more momentum we put toward this, and I agree wholeheartedly that if we do a listening session and really allow the data to tell a story. Oftentimes we on the agency side, we look at numbers all the time, and we can often, what's the word for it? We sort of glaze over it because we're so used to looking at it. It's not that we don't have a heart or care about what those numbers represent, but it's just a matter of doing business. And so this helps to sort of interrupt that for everyone that's involved that wants to address disproportionality within our system. So I think this is an excellent idea, and any way that ORJ can help support, we would definitely do so.
Yeah, and I'm also hoping that, from the listening sessions that the community, we all, as law enforcement agencies, we all need to be held accountable. And we all need to look within ourselves and how we are setting policies and procedures and how we're doing things. And like I said, I just hope that the pressure stays on the departments to provide this data, and specifically, when you're talking probation, sheriff, police, I don't want to lose the sight of the district attorney's office as well, because I think that data is very important when you're talking about the entire picture of people who are remaining in custody as a result of the DA filing petitions and that type of stuff. And so, like I said, I just hope that the community continues to hold all the justice partners equally accountable.
Right on. I completely agree in that, and what Patrice had said and Cheryl before. So, and I'll just maybe take the second to also give my appreciation to probation for leading by example and transparency. So that makes the difference for other law enforcement partners to see that there is a trusted partner that's already doing that by example. And I was going to say to Jane, and this isn't going to be a full answer. I mean, it's part of the reason why we need to have these listening sessions. But in the meantime, if you were to want to try to find that information, I think you can find it as attachments to the agenda packet to the data subcommittee, which is cumbersome for those who don't have that sort of background with the county website, et cetera. But I think you'll find it there because that's been kind of the source of the discussion that's happening and saying, hey, we need to get this out in front of people. So I think in the short term, you can get it there. And that getting it in digestible forms definitely resonates with me, Patrice, what you're talking about. I think I've probably given various forms of a presentation based off the data we got back in 2015, probably almost like hundreds of times in different community spaces and law clerks and such. And just having people understand these basics of this is the percentages we're talking about relative to population, and have that fully understood and come across in ways that so we can make the most of what's there, which is very telling information. So others thoughts? I'll invite anyone else to give comment on this.
Yeah, I want to chime in. I want to ironically agree with everyone. I think Melvin had a good point about the pressure, applying the pressure to making sure everyone is accountable, and then also with Cheryl being a professional in the systematic way of collecting data and distributing it. I think that they're all relevant, right? And so, and Patrice, what she said was, finding a way to let our partners be inclusive, and even educating them on how to obtain that data or collect it or log it. So some of the agencies may not be as savvy and may not be as up to par, more like a layman term on systemic data or targeted data or something like that, so that other agencies can gather it and then put it out the way it needs to be distributed. So I think everybody has a valid point, and I did want to just make sure that I spoke on what Patrice talked about certain agencies, the way they do business or the way they collect data may be a little abnormal from other agencies. And so as a whole, if we want that data to be available in a certain format, then we would need to collaborate. And what she talked about was, them having a role in that and saying, hey, this is what we're expecting. This is how it needs to happen. And maybe can educate the rest of us on what needs to be brought forth. And so I think I just want to chime in on that and kind of, follow that cab as to what she was talking about.
And if I
Thank
could
you.
say
That
one more,
was very thorough. Thanks.
if I could say one more thing to the point that Renel's mentioned, because we did talk about this during the data subcommittee, that when we were presenting, particularly when we're presenting before the mayor's conference, and encouraging their support, that we want to get really specific about our asks, what types of data that we're looking for. I'm not even sure if maybe once we get there, okay, maybe we could go down to to each agency and say, actually, we need it in this particular format, right? Because we're going to have to do that anyway with the agencies that actually submitted data. It's data that's really difficult to try to analyze, but that was something that did come up in our subcommittee meeting, is that for our job to get really clear about what types of data we want to see and what questions that data is answering for us. I think once we get that really clear, it will be easier for us to share this information with the community, with the public, because then there's some alignment in terms of, you know, the thought process that this work is leading us to.
Along that lines, though, it also is, and this is where alignment comes from for the whole oversight body, because there's also always some hesitancy, and there was some previously a little bit of reticence over what to ask for, right? How much do we ask for? When do we ask for it? Do we tiptoe? Do we ask for just a little bit now and maybe a little bit later? Because, and I'm just gonna be very frank, law enforcement doesn't want to do this. The vast majority of it doesn't want to give up the data. And this is what we learned, Christopher and I, when we went to the chief's meeting. There was, and I'm going to say it because it sounds like excuses to me. Well, you know, we don't have a lot of resources. It's really hard for us to get these kind of data. We don't really collect this information. And for those of us who've been doing this a long time, there's an excuse. Well, we would get it to you if we could. And as I've said before, if you can arrest people, if you can find a way to put them behind bars, you can find a way to tell the public where they are, why they're there, and how long you've been keeping them. There's not our job as the public, as the community, as taxpayers, to help you figure out how to tell us why you have people and where you have them, how long you're going to keep them. So the reticence that we may see, and I'm saying this to all of us, from even some of the people who sit on these oversight body, if we are not unified in what we are deciding we need to ask for data, none of this works. So we can't have some people saying we want all of the data and some saying, well, I think just asking them for a little bit is enough for right now. Maybe we only ask for a little bit today, and then next time we can ask for a little bit more. And then, you know, we can just ask for a little bit more in a couple of years. I mean, it's really good that they're cooperating at all. So maybe we just like, you know, tiptoe in. Nah, we're not tiptoeing. We want all the information right now. And because I'm going to tell you, 2 years ago, probation wouldn't give us anything. They came up with all kinds of rules and why they can't help us. And that's why I'm so grateful, Sir Melvin, that you guys are doing what you can to be, you know, transparent. Transparency is important. Miss Patrice with the ORJ and all of you guys help. This is important. That's why the public has its opinion of the criminal legal system, is because they do see it is not being transparent. So yes, transparency is important, but more important is yes, Miss Kiki, the way that you're handling your department and being open and honest in the communication and saying, if you say that you're going to have a level of integrity and transparency, is backing that up with providing the information to the public when they ask for it. But we, as an oversight body, including the data subcommittee and the community engagement community, this is where this committee comes in, is asking the right questions to ferret out that information and then provide that information to the public. And this committee's role in making sure that that information gets to the public is imperative in that mission. So I would say that one of the charges is what information does this committee believe needs to be shared with the public? So the data committee, we are working to get the data. What do you believe is imperative that the public must know in order to be fully informed? So Jeff, that's what I'm asking right now. It's one thing to gather the data, but what do you think they really, really need to know?
Thank you, Cheryl. So let's take a little bit of time with that now. I think we've all sort of agreed, if I'm gathering what's been set up until this point, that we are in favor of taking some of our time, energy, resources, and working to have a way to share this information in a way that's going to be understood and continue to try to push for accountability through expanded data efforts. So, okay, we want to do that. And Cheryl's saying, let's focus this a little bit more in the moment, if I'm following this thread, to say, well, what exactly are we asking for? So I would think as a starting point, and maybe what we need to kind of do is mutually knowledge share about, like, well, we're already asking for this, right? But I would be thinking at least what came on that chart that we had received from Tim Ewell, County Administrator Office back in, I think it was 2015, which was pretrial detention. So meaning who's being held in jail after charge, but before trial, and then who was filed on altogether, charged, meaning misto and felony in criminal case. It did not include juvenile, but I think we should have that. Sorry, in terms of charging, it didn't, but it did have juvenile probation. It did have adult on probation. And then it had, I think, AB 109, which was who was on that form of supervision. It had jury representation, and this is all by racial breakdown. And that's what I'm remembering. And what do I think also, just off the top of my head, is it was missing arrest data. We didn't have hardly anything or anything on it, which was a major gap. And I would think, as I'm just holding the microphone again for a moment, to say that all these discretionary points are the pieces where I feel like that's really missing in, okay, charges, but if there are ways to be looking at detail of, did you file felony or misdemeanor?
Yeah, if possible.
And
do you have something somewhere you need to be? I can take her.
We're good. I was going to say on bail decisions, I don't think we had anything on that, whether bail was being requested by district attorney. There's a lot of in the details sort of thing that I think are decision points of some of the actors beyond just, well, this is what we received, so then we pushed over to, because, for example, bail is something that is an individual determination made by the different actors, and it's not like, well, that was the arrest that we got. So that's what I would be thinking at start, and maybe I would just invite anyone who knows from the previous context, Cheryl, others of, well, this is like the baseline that we're asking for already on table, and should we be saying the things that I mentioned, is that already being on the list, so to speak?
I would say no.
Okay.
I think where we are is essentially, I think the easiest way for me to distill sort of what the ask looks like right now, which kind of gets to Cheryl's larger point. It's almost like what we're trying to say is, hey, here's what we get from probation. Here's what they're gracious enough to share with us on a monthly basis or on a now quarterly basis, right, going forward. Could we get something like that from you, right, so that we have a sense on an ongoing basis of what's going on in the system? So, I mean, I think the things that you raised, especially as far as creating sort of an overarching message or theme or takeaway about sort of where we are overall, would be all good things to ask or good things to gather somehow. You mentioned the county administrator who would have been the person who supplied that data back in 2015. So I don't know exactly what went into that process or if that could be replicated at all. But you know, a lot of the things that I think you spoke about involve some agencies that we're not able to directly get much from right now. So for us, it's like we really just want to get a sense on a continuous basis of what is happening. But I mean, I think all of the things that you said sound great. Like if we could get them, I think community, you know, not that I need to speak for them. I think that those are the types of things that people would want to see. You know, and I think that can give us some idea in terms of what sorts of, you know, things we should be asking for, and we'll see what we get.
Can I make a comment really quickly? Because what I'm hearing is, well, let me first say that I'm not a data person. I like the story, like Patrice pointed out. Having had so much experience with foster care, I understand that there are some things that make absolutely no sense when you look at numbers, but if you know the story, then it starts to make sense. So the thing about, and Melvin kind of touched on this too, about how there are, you know, sort of many pieces to the puzzle. And I think one thing that's happened that's actually beautiful in this process is that there is a new and emerging understanding of how different our roles all are during the continuum of this process, right? From birth to 100. And anybody who touched the system, you know, the system at any point, we all have very different roles. And the thing, like to Christopher's comments that he was making, is now you all have received probation data. Well, if you've been paying attention to sort of all the little presentations that we've done to really clarify and explain what it is that probation actually does, then you'll know that you're at the end of the continuum when you're talking about the probation data. So what we kind of have to do from here, and this is a non-data person speaking, right? So I'm thinking about the stories, is work backwards. So Jeff, you were making some comments about things that seem to be missing, and that's because those are not probation data points, right? So I think now what we have to do is pay attention to, well, who is the appropriate person to answer that question, and start to work backwards. And what you may find is the DA will say, oh, well, we filed on these 100 cases. So then you need to know, well, then which agency sent you those 100 cases? And then you start to divvy up all these police agencies, and then you start to see the trends in one area versus another. So I think that's just important to point out, because again, you have to really understand what the roles are of the various people who are involved in this process. And, you know, I'll be the first to say publicly, after 18 years in this business, I was very convinced that folks think that probation, you know, drives around and snatches kids off the street, when that's not in fact what we do. There are so many things that have to happen before we even come in contact with the kid. So when you talk about discretion, as far as we're concerned, our discretion is very limited, because by the time we're involved, they've been arrested. You know what I mean? So there's many other pieces of the puzzle that could have happened, or maybe they're already detained because they've been filed on, you know what I mean? So I think what Christopher kind of highlights is the need for us to really understand the differences in our roles and who can actually answer some of those more minute, detailed questions. Because if you're starting with probation data, again, you're starting at the end. So we're going to have to work ourselves backwards and really look at what you have and what's missing, and then figure out which is the most appropriate agency to answer those questions. And my guess is the sort of next step down is going to be the district attorney's office. And then if we're talking about maybe, you know, let's just say minors who are arrested for misdemeanors, then that next step down would be the police agencies, because they're referring them directly to probation. And so I think, you know, I won't repeat myself, but I think you get what I'm trying to say, is that to unravel it and really, because I don't care so much about the number, I want to know what the number actually means, because that's the only way we can actionize a prevention to, you know, making that an escalated issue. So for me to get to the why that Patrice talked about, we have to make sure we're asking the right question to the right person. And I think we are in a position where we're answering everything that probation can answer. And so now it's kind of doing the roadmap and to figure out how they all got here, is that we have to unravel.
Yeah, this gives good context. Patrice, I saw your hand.
Yeah, because I got really excited, Kiki, what you're saying here. This this is always a bad idea when I start speaking on ideas because it may means more work for me. But
Go.
This has me thinking about what you just mentioned, has me thinking about the sequential intercept mapping tool that was used back in 2018. And we talked, it was showcased a little bit during the symposium that we just had on Monday. And even though that showed the different intercept points by which adults who have acute mental health illnesses can potentially be diverted out, I think for the purposes of a listening session for a community, we can sort of utilize that same sort of structure to highlight the different data points that we have so far. So that way community can see the entire continuum, right? Like you're mentioning, and at what point where an individual is touching the justice system, okay, that there's a gap here, or there's maybe extremity around disproportionality in this particular intercept. That could be posed to the public or to community and get feedback on what do you think is necessary here, or we could tell the story of why that number might exist at this particular intercept, but then give feedback from the community as to like what, you know, some sort of natural problem solving, if you will, that can come both through the listening and the learning, and then getting feedback from the community. That's just one thought in terms of like maybe structuring how the listening session could possibly go and make it easy for a community to kind of understand where how each data point impacts the other. Because you're right, it's a ripple effect, right? Depending on where the person enters and exits the justice system.
Yeah, context, all of this, I don't think the devil's in the details. It's like the greater truth, the greater insight is in the details, right? Like as we look at this, we better understand what's happening. And let me take a second and share screen for the document I was talking about, because the word couldn't help but smile, Chris, as you were saying, like interested in how did that process went and whether that could be replicated. I mean, man, have I thought that so many times since this document. How exactly did we get all this information, and can we keep doing that? So let me just share this screen and say, yeah, I think there's a lot of good mileage, like that should have been good mileage. It's not like this was inappropriate. This was in response to Racial Justice Coalition, which was pretty much in its infancy at the time, in 2015, writing a letter to the Board of Supervisors saying, we call for disinformation and accountability, etc. And that got referred to the Public Protection Committee, and the Public Protection Committee at a very sparsely attended meeting said, what exactly are you asking for? And I recall that a couple of us were there and saying, these are the things specifically we would want to know, this type of info. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit more, and I have to recall how to send the file into our chat, but can attach. And even closer, right, census estimate, criminal cases, meaning cases filed, pretrial, who's held in pretrial detention, juvenile probation. So it doesn't show anything on juvenile filings, but on probation, adult probation, so who was convicted, but well, how about people that were sent prison? Not included here. AB 109, subset, was that, you know, again, was that something that was going to be a definite prison term, and or was it discretionary? Could have been a misdemeanor. There's all these middle things in there. And jury appearance, which didn't include, well, jury summons. What exactly are we talking on jury appearance? But all of this is, these are different sources, right? That couldn't have all been coming from probation. We know it wasn't. And it says at the top here, sources, census, probation department, Contra Costa Superior Court. Okay, so they were giving some of this information, and notable that it did come from county administrator's office, and well, they're a major point of contact for everybody. So if it were coming from, and I have to say that this has been major for all of the agencies, I think, since, from my perspective, to have this coming from that source. It was not from any of the independent actors that brought it forward, but it's kind of like came from, the administrator said, but why got from all these different groups and put this together. And it was Tim Ewell who was staffing the Public Protection Committee at the time. And I think it was in response to John Joya saying, what can we get in here? Is there something you can bring to us? Just looking at the chat. And some of this is okay, Census Bureau, nothing that's surprising, but yeah, source, courts criminal case management system, data retrieved from district attorney files. Okay, well, somehow that can happen, right? Can't be that there is no such case management system. Well, there must be. And can't retrieve data from a files. Well, that must be possible because it says it right here. And this came from that. So well, how did you guys do that? How did you get all this? You should be able to do it again. And if they're like, well, I don't know. Well, someone was working at the time and did that, assisted with this. Pre-trial, probation department, CMS. Upon interview with clients, probation officer enters data retrieved from California law enforcement telecommunications system, public defender's office worksheet. Public defender is also able to, right? There's stuff that's here. We have some things that we've obtained. And maybe these are things that were already reported to. I don't know, right? Could be the administrator's office. We already get that info from them. Could be, guessing. Again, you're just seeing these sources. Probation department at the time. Clerk enters the data retrieved from the court. So, again, HR. And this didn't include everything. We had discussions in early, so like where else could you find discussion on this stuff would be early racial justice task force agenda packets. So if you dig around in there and early, because there are many of those, of course, but you'll find some of the discussion about this, like, well, we should be having more of this, and people saying you can't get that. And county council opinions as to whether this information could be obtained altogether. It was, and it can be anonymized. We've gone through that process. So maybe enough said for me on this, but I do think that this is important, basically precedent for what is at minimum possible, if not much more than that, because that was possible 6 years ago, and likely all of the agencies have been at least maintained, if not improved, their data management since 2015.
And I just want to make just point out where it says, where it said probation, CMS, case management system. We when we're asked for data, we actually have to physically pull files and hand count because we don't have a case management system. And I only say that to say, if we're able to provide the data that we've been able to provide without a case management system, there is no reason that we can't get data from all these other departments who do have case management systems.
Yes, no excuses. And yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking at just as you're reading it, clerk enters data retrieved from court. So that sounds like by hand. Can be done with that attitude. Yes, can be done.
And it should be done. We should stop accepting excuses on why it's not being done. That's my opinion.
So can I ask a favor, Jeff? Can you send me that, either if you can include it in the chat or send it to me via email? I can put my email in the chat as well. Just
Let me see if I send this. Does that come through? No, it didn't. I'm going to be able to do it. I can. Oh, look, I can add a file. My computer. I'm going to do it to everyone because this was public information. It was. I got it from an agenda from my. Here we are.
The reason why I'm asking is because that would actually be good to include in our presentation to the mayor's conference, so that they could see what's been what has been reported historically, what we're receiving now, and why it's imperative we see all elements, right, all points of the continuum, to get a better snapshot of how folks are touching the justice system and what we can do about it.
Absolutely.
And by the way, that that draft presentation, we will bring it to the Data and Services Committee, the next Data and Services Committee meeting, to get feedback. We're putting it together with the intent that it is representative of the voice of our job. So we encourage you to attend that next meeting.
Hopefully that came through from everybody.
So, excuse me,
Mark,
Jeff,
if
if I could.
Please.
Yeah. So this has been an interesting conversation, and one of the things that it just seems to me is that there will always be agencies run by various people who have a disposition to not share information for whatever reason. And I don't know if this is beyond the purview of this subcommittee or the larger committee as a whole, but it's definitely within the purview of the Board of Supervisors to demand that the state, through legislation, force these agencies to collect the data somehow, some way, and to share that data publicly. We can go through and try to coerce each and every single one of the law enforcement agencies in Contra Costa County to share the information. But it seems to me that as a public, if the public tells the legislators, listen, we want this data, and I think we're in an era where it's probably going to fall on more welcoming ears, that there should be legislation to force agencies to collect this data and provide this data publicly, so that we don't have to go through these shenanigans in order to collect what should be simple data. And also, it would hopefully set up best practices so that folks aren't, doing it by hand, like our probation department apparently did without a case management system. So that may be a larger conversation to have, but it just seems, I worked in schools, the amount of data that we have to collect and provide to the state is astronomical, right? There are whole data departments because the law says either on a federal or state level, if you want these dollars, you will do X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure why we can't advocate for that in at least at the state level. We should be advocating at a federal level, but the state level seems to be far more a winnable feat. So my 2 cents, definitely an interesting conversation, but I would urge us to also look at legislative solutions to this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Marcus, in terms of like the systemic fix. What is how this will be overarching changed, and also complementing in the meantime, what we're doing. So it's kind of those parallel paths, that we're not having to cobble together constantly, but also taking the action now. Looking in the chat. Yes. Okay. Appreciate that, Noe. And we're gonna have to be respectful of everyone's 4:30 stop. That's our intention with the group.
Cheryl has her hand up.
Yes, Cheryl, please.
So in reference to what Sir Marcus was speaking of, just so you know, there is a federal regulation that requires this information to be provided, a certain amount of information to be provided. It's just that it doesn't come down for another year, almost a year and a half. And they know they have to provide it. It's just like pulling teeth to get them to provide it or to provide it early. Many of these agencies are using as the excuse a lack of resources. So that's why, it's important that the oversight body is very clear on what they're asking for. So what we are asking for, I should say. But, across the country, this is going on where there's this push-pull, right? As to what is being requested, what is required. UC Berkeley and Stanford are two of the universities that are in the forefront of this across the country in gathering this information. and being able to provide it on a national level. But this is coming down to federal regulations, not just state or local. And so it has to be provided, and they know they have to gear up to be ready to provide this information. Contra Costa County has been at the forefront of pushing to get this information and to establish these systems. We have been very fortunate to have students from Berkeley Law and from several Stanford programs to help us with this. We've had the wonderful Christopher James helping us as well. But this is something that even though we can have legislation, you can't legislate integrity, right? You just can't. So we have to be us, the public, have to keep pushing, and we have to stay on all of our law enforcement partners and our legislators to make sure that just because a law is passed, you can't sit back and wait for it. We still have to be clear on our mandate to make sure that we get what the public is entitled to, and that we have people like Miss Kiki, like Sir Melvin, like Miss Patrice, and some of our other more transparent partners who are going to do the spirit of their work and the spirit of the legislation, not just the letter. And we don't always have that. So that's all I want to say, is that it's the spirit of the legislation that is most important, not just the letter, because some will follow the letter and we still won't get the information we need. So it is up to us. That's how this RJOB got started, was the community push for it. And we would not ease up until those supervisors gave us what the community needed. So they saw. One more thing I wanted to make sure Miss Patrice didn't tell you guys why we are going before the mayor's conference, how we got to that point. I know she mentioned the mayor's conference, but you may want to let them know how we reached the conclusion that we needed to go to the mayor's conference, if she would like to.
Sure, and then you can correct me if I got the sentiments inaccurately. But the idea is that after both Cheryl and Chris presented to the police chiefs, there was very little response back with regards to their commitment to share data from their individual agencies. And so Supervisor Candace Anderson actually put in a request directly to the mayor's conference to ask that that our job be placed on a future agenda for us to present before the mayors, asking for their support and to direct their police chiefs or city managers to release the data to our job. So we are in the process now putting that presentation together. Cheryl made sure to hold our data subcommittee to the fire to ensure that we are being very thoughtful and mindful about our framing to mayors. As you know, those are elected officials. So the way in which they retrieve a message versus the way in which a police chief may receive a message is slightly different, right? So we are working on that now to be sure that we are framing both not only the work of our job, but then also our requests to them and being very clear about the expectation to the mayors in hopes that we will receive the kind of data that we need. Did I get that right, Cheryl?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah, about the spirit and intention, and right when there's the will to make this happen. So that resonates a lot. Let me just note that we've got about 5 minutes, so let's manage our expectations where we're going to try to move to. I think we try to have a full kind of next step here, and that likely we're not going to be able to touch the other items, I don't think. Beyond our just kind of the work that we've done and thought here, and I think there's a lot that can be captured in moving forward. our next step in terms of collaborating with data subcommittee, were there already dates kind of thought of or other models? It's really kind of coming to us and what do we think of how this would work? And we're brainstorming of what it would look like, right? Yeah. Okay, so, well, the format that had lots of folks come previously is kind of the concept. I'm thinking still a remote idea for if it is to happen in the short term, is I'm saying thinking out loud. And if it would be further out, then, well, there are still in-person possibilities. So I don't want to be necessarily tackling that whole thing as much as just saying that, okay, we are in favor of having a listening session and co-hosting one, I suppose, and that we've given some thought of what that would involve and that we can report that back to the data subcommittee that we're into it. Here are some of our thoughts of what that is, and that we'd like to continue collaborating. I'm thinking that it would be in the next 2-3 months, something like we're thinking that this is not going to be, because it also has to be informing us as that we're moving forward. It's not supposed to be this fully polished presentation of the data because it's kind of saying, well, what more do you need to see as we're going along here? So, right? Does that sound?
I think that's about right. Also, I just have to say this because we've been putting it on the agendas for a while and we haven't done anything with it. We're also trying to get feedback in terms of where it should go, right? Like, yeah. So what website would you actually access and find? Like, if we published it somewhere, where are you likely to actually be able to go get it, see it, right? And check back and find it when you're looking for it or when you think about it. So I think that's right? Like, it's okay to be iterative. It's okay to ask, is this presented in a way that makes sense to you? Should it look different? It's okay to, to sort of ask those sorts of questions and hopefully, at some point, perhaps in the future, right, come back and revisit with that feedback in mind.
Yeah. Okay, so it's on our agenda and we didn't touch on it. Maybe I'll just extemporaneously say that at each of our spaces, I think maybe that's part of the thing is each of us have our interested parties, the Racial Justice Coalition, Immigrants' Rights Alliance, and then each of the agency partners, right, have their respective Facebook pages or spaces where they have this. And that it doesn't need to be necessarily this one centralized space where the data lives. I mean, that's good that it's there, but it's also we all have it in our respective spaces that it's kind of you can hook into. I'm thinking about this as we'll continue to have something, but that kind of makes, because I'm kind of well, for lots of folks, it's got to be TikTok or Instagram or something like that. And the idea of the county something running that is kind of yeah, I don't know exactly. But each of these agencies have their social media places, and those could be real spaces that people actually already are going and then we'll find, rather than you can go on a website and they're well, I never go to that website though. I would never be there already. Whereas they're kind of already on this stream. Volunteered. Yes.
That's what I heard.
Yes, that's exactly right. On that note, okay, well, I suppose what I'd say then is that we are at our end of time and that we have our next meeting and we'll report this back to data. And I appreciate everyone for their excellent work. Anyone have last minute something that they want to say?
I just want to thank this group and the data. I mean, I guess I need to go to the data subcommittee more. Just the work that they're doing. Their side of the partnership is obviously very effective. And knowing Cheryl's on it, not surprising. And just how appreciated it is that, still plugging away, and some of the information will get pushed forward. Yeah, it's great. It's very impressive. And it's good to get some good news once in a while. Appreciate it.
I'm on all of
Thanks,
them,
Jane.
Jane.
All right. I love that ending note. Bye, everybody. Until next time.
Bye, thanks.